Renaer and Rickson, two officers with misplaced confidence, believed their badges granted them immunity from consequences. For years, they had used their authority to intimidate and control, preying on those they saw as vulnerable. They targeted anyone they thought would comply without resistance. But they were wrong, until they met her. Amara, a black woman walking her two German shepherds, was just another person in their eyes, easy prey for their unwarranted authority. To them, she appeared like anyone who would silently obey, not putting up a fight. What they didn't realize was the precision in her every step, the unshakable focus in her eyes. She wasn't just anyone. She was a former Navy SEAL, trained for far more dangerous situations than anything the street could throw at her. What happened next would dismantle their illusion of control and prove that justice can't be silenced. Before we dive deeper into the story, let us know where you're watching from and be sure to hit that subscribe button. Amara walked calmly down the cracked sidewalk as the dawn sky turned gray and orange, with her two loyal German shepherds at her side. The air was still crisp, untouched by the day's inevitable heat, and the neighborhood was silent, with only the occasional chirp of a bird and the distant hum of a lawnmower breaking the stillness. A few leaves rustled on the pavement as the morning breeze whispered through the street. This peaceful solitude was her favorite part of the day, before the world fully awakened. After years in the military, Amara had learned to appreciate these quiet moments. Her life was different now. No more deployments, no more briefings, no more drills. She had left that life behind for something new. The suburban neighborhood she now called home was meant to be a fresh start, a place where she could finally breathe. The houses here were well kept, though not without signs of wear. Rusted mailboxes, peeling paint, and cracked driveways dotted the street. She passed an elderly man, leaning on his rake. Their eyes met briefly, and he gave her a tight smile before turning away. It wasn't outright hostility, but it wasn't exactly warm either. It was the same look she had gotten from people in stores, banks, and even the vet's office when she first moved in, a look that asked, "What are you doing here?" Her two dogs were alert, their movements sharp. Chaos, the larger of the two, sniffed at a nearby bush, while Mercy, the smaller one, stayed close by her side. Amara adjusted the leash, remembering the days when they were more than just pets. They were partners in operations that required precision and trust. Now, they were her constant companions in a world that still felt foreign to her, despite all the years of service. As Amara continued walking, she noticed a patrol car cruising slowly down the opposite side of the street. She'd seen this before, but today it felt different. The car slowed as it passed, and the driver's gaze lingered just a little too long. It wasn't clear if it was her or her dogs that caught their attention, but Amara felt the shift in the air. She kept her expression calm, as she had learned to do long ago. But Chaos and Mercy, more perceptive than most, seemed uneasy. Chaos looked toward the car, his ears flicking back, while Mercy let out a soft huff of irritation. Amara turned the corner, where the sidewalk grew uneven, and memories of her training days flashed through her mind, the pressure of missions where failure wasn't an option. As she continued, she saw the patrol car again, now parked at the edge of a patch of grass. Two officers stepped out, one tall and stocky, the other lean with a sharp expression. At first, they didn't look her way, but as she approached, their attention shifted. The taller officer, with Renaer stitched on his uniform, leaned casually against the car. "Morning," he called out, his tone light. "Morning," Amara replied, her pace unbroken. "Nice dogs," he remarked, nodding toward Chaos and Mercy. "What breeds are they?" Amara felt a hint of unease, but kept her voice steady. "German shepherds. Good guard dogs, I bet." Renaer smiled faintly, but his eyes remained unreadable. His partner, Rickson, stood silently, his gaze fixed on Amara. "Just pets," Amara replied, her grip tightening slightly on the leash. Renair's smile didn't falter. Pretty big for just pets. At his words, Mercy stiffened, the leash pulling tight as she stood her ground. Amara subtly adjusted it, keeping her eyes on the officers. "They're well trained," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Military trained?" Renair asked, still casual, but there was an edge in his tone now. Amara could sense the shift in the officer's demeanor. What had started as casual curiosity now carried an edge that wasn't entirely innocent. Renair's tone, laced with questions, turned more probing, while Rickson's posture suggested something far less friendly. They were no longer just asking. Now, they were pushing boundaries, testing control. "Nice dogs," Rickson said, crossing his arms and leaning forward. "What kind of training are we talking about?" Amara's body tensed, a warning sign she couldn't ignore. Chaos and Mercy, her ever-vigilant partners, had already sensed the change in the air. The dogs' bodies shifted, muscles coiling as they instinctively recognized the threat before she could fully process it. Amara knew this type of tension well. She had seen it before, not from law enforcement, but from those who thought they had the power to dictate the situation, to control it. "We're just out for a walk," Amara said, keeping her tone firm but calm. "Have a good day." She tried to move past them, but Renair stepped forward, subtly blocking her path. His hand hovered near his holster, the mask of casualness slipping enough for Amara to see the intent behind his actions. The street, once calm, now felt too still. Her mind flicked through possible scenarios, preparing for whatever might come next. Rickson squatted down, his face twisting into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He whistled sharply to get Chaos's attention, his voice low and coaxing. "Nice dog, come here, boy." Chaos's eyes locked onto Rickson's every movement. His stance didn't waver, his muscles tight and focused. Amara's hand tightened around the leashes, a warning unspoken. Chaos didn't move, not even to acknowledge the treat Rickson dangled in front of him. Instead, he gave a low, steady growl that vibrated in the stillness of the street, a clear signal of his discomfort. Rickson laughed nervously, clearly unsettled by the dog's reaction. "Not very friendly, huh? What's wrong, boy? You scared?" He inched closer, the sound of his boots crunching on the sidewalk. "Don't," Amara warned, her voice firm but not loud, her gaze unwavering. Rickson, however, didn't seem to take the hint. He smirked and pulled a piece of jerky from his pocket, holding it out to Chaos like it was some kind of peace offering. "Maybe this will help," he said, leaning in. Chaos growled again, this time louder, his lips pulling back to reveal sharp teeth. It was a warning, but Rickson didn't pull back. Instead, he pressed forward, pushing the situation to the brink. "Don't do that," Amara said, her voice cutting through the tension. "He's fine." Renair, who had been standing back, took a step forward. His eyes flicked from the dog to Amara. "Your dog a problem, ma'am?" His tone was casual, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. "Sounds like he's ready to attack." "They're not aggressive," Amara shot back, her patience thinning. "You're provoking them." Rickson's grin tightened. "Just being friendly," he said, though his words rang hollow. "Folks like you move into neighborhoods like this and think you can just walk around, make your own rules." Chaos barked sharply, cutting him off. The sound of the dog's bark hung in the air, and Rickson flinched, instinctively stepping back. His hand hovered near his weapon, and Amara's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. "Back off," she said, her words firm, precise. "You're scaring them." Rickson ignored her, his eyes darting from Chaos to Mercy, then back to her. "You need to get these mutts in check. Last thing we need is some attack dogs running loose." "They're not running loose," Amara interrupted, stepping forward slightly, positioning herself between the dogs and the officers. "They're under control. You need to stand down." Renair's expression twisted into something mocking, his smirk spreading across his face. "If they're so well trained, why are they growling at us? Doesn't seem very under control. They're responding to you, Amara said, her patience running thin. And if you just... Before she could finish, Chaos growled again, the sound low and menacing. Rickson jumped back, his hand now fully on his gun. That's it, he snapped, his voice rising. Control your dogs, or I will. Amara raised her hand, trying to diffuse the escalating tension. Wait, but it was too late. Rickson reached for his weapon, and Chaos surged forward, straining against the leash. Amara's heart stopped as the sharp crack of a gunshot split the air. Chaos yelped, stumbling back, the bullet missing him by inches. Enough! Amara shouted, her voice ringing with authority. She stepped forward, her body tense, her hands firm on the leashes. Stop right now. Rickson raised his gun again, his hand trembling slightly. Chaos snarled, his body coiled for action. The quiet street had now turned into a battlefield, and it was clear no one was backing down. Amara's grip tightened around the leashes as the growls from Chaos and Mercy filled the air, a steady, low rumble that echoed the rising tension. Renair's hand was already on his taser, eyes locked on Amara, but he hadn't made a move yet. The air felt thick, charged like a coiled spring, ready to snap at any moment. Last warning, Rickson's voice cracked with urgency. Get these damn mutts down, or I'll put them both in the ground. Amara didn't flinch. Her stance remained solid, her gaze unwavering. Lower your weapon, she commanded, her tone firm, clear. You don't have to do this. Rickson's sneer was sharp. Who the hell do you think you are? He spat. You come out here parading your jungle dogs, thinking you can walk around like you own the place. You don't belong here. Her jaw tightened, but she kept her voice steady. I said, lower your weapon. Renair's voice cut through the air, sharp and condescending. You really think you can just bark orders at us? You're outnumbered, sweetheart, and no one's going to back you up. The dogs shifted, muscles tensing in sync, waiting for her signal, but Amara didn't give it yet. She took a slow step forward, her palms open and visible. You need to step down, she said, her voice icy. You're out of your league. Rickson's laugh was brittle, humorless. Out of our league? He sneered. Look at you. What? You some wannabe soldier? Think you're tough 'cause you got some scary dogs? Amara's patience was wearing thin, but she cut through his mocking tone with her own. I'm giving you a chance to walk away. Renair smirked, the taser in his hand clicking faintly as he activated it. She thinks she's giving us a chance, he muttered, a derisive chuckle escaping him. What a joke. Go ahead, Rickson taunted. Make a move! I dare you! That was all she needed. In one swift motion, Amara closed the gap, grabbing Rickson's wrist and twisting it violently. His finger involuntarily pulled the trigger, but the bullet went harmlessly into the ground. Before he could recover, Amara slammed her elbow into his temple, sending him crashing to the ground like a rag doll. The gun clattered against the sidewalk, and Rickson crumpled, clutching his head in pain. Renair reacted instantly, raising the taser, his voice full of rage. That's it, he shouted. I warned you. Before Renair could fire, Chaos surged forward. His jaws closed around the taser, ripping it from Renair's grip. The large dog growled, his deep voice vibrating through the air as he yanked the taser away. Renair stumbled back, frantic, his hand reaching for his baton. Get these damn dogs off me, he yelled, swinging the baton wildly. Mercy darted in, snapping at his hand, forcing him to drop it. Renair tried to retreat, but the dogs moved as one. Chaos blocked him, while Mercy lunged at his legs, keeping him off balance. Amara, maintaining her calm focus, stepped around Rickson's limp form to grab the body cam from his vest. Her fingers worked quickly, yanking it free. She looked up just in time to see Renair backed up against the patrol car, cursing and flailing as he tried to push the dogs away. Amara glanced around and saw a neighbor's porch light flicker on. From the corner of her eye, she noticed a figure at a window, phone raised, filming. The reality of the situation hit her like a punch in the gut. The footage would be everywhere soon, manipulated and shared. Without wasting a moment, she grabbed the body cam and snapped her fingers twice. Chaos and Mercy retreated, falling in beside her as she sprinted down the street. Behind her, Renair's angry shouts echoed through the air. "She's running! Get her, damn it!" But by the time Renair regained his footing and reached for his radio, Amara and the dogs had vanished into the early morning shadows, disappearing into the winding streets. Amara moved quickly through the dense woods, her boots crunching against leaves and branches. Chaos trotted slightly ahead, nose to the ground, while Mercy stayed close to her side. The forest offered cover, the early morning light barely filtering through the thick canopy above. Despite their quiet movements, Amara noticed the slight limp in Mercy's step and the streak of matted fur near Chaos's shoulder. They didn't stop until the undergrowth thinned and a narrow path appeared. It was one she recognized from months of solitary hikes. The old cabin came into view, tucked behind a line of pines and almost swallowed by the forest. The small structure, with its faded paint and sagging porch, hadn't been lived in for years, but the walls were intact, and it was far enough from any main road to buy her some time. Amara pushed the door open, stepping into the musty air inside. The small space was dim, with only a dusty table, an old chair tipped over in the corner, and a cot that could barely hold together for one night. Chaos and Mercy followed her in, their breaths steady, but their movements slower now. Amara lowered herself to the floor, pulling her backpack around and rummaging for her first aid kit. As she worked on cleaning Mercy's paw and checking Chaos's shoulder, her mind raced. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the weight of what had just happened crashed down on her. She had taken down 2 officers, one with her bare hands, the other disarmed by her dogs, and fled the scene. She knew how it looked. The footage from that neighbor's phone would be shared, altered, twisted. The small portable radio in her bag crackled to life. She twisted the dial, catching snippets of chatter, code numbers, rapid voices. Then, a phrase that made her blood run cold. "Suspect is considered armed and dangerous. Approach with extreme caution," and sent a quick message to an old contact, a reliable source within the department who could help her confirm some of her suspicions. She had no proof yet, just a growing sense that something was deeply wrong. Her instincts had always been sharp, and right now they were screaming that this case was far from what it appeared. Darnell leaned back in her chair, rubbing her eyes. She hadn't slept much in the past 48 hours, but there was no time for rest now. She needed answers, and she was determined to get them. Her phone buzzed again, but this time she didn't hesitate. She picked it up, seeing the familiar number flash on the screen. "Darnell," she answered. "Lee, it's me," the voice on the other end said. It was a low, calm voice she hadn't heard in a long time. "You're getting close, aren't you?" Darnell's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected to hear from this person so soon. "I'm working on it," she replied, her voice steady. "I need your help. I need all the evidence you've got on Amara Briggs." There was a pause on the other end, then a sigh. "You're not going to like what I found." "I know," Darnell said, her voice low. "But I need to know everything. Don't leave anything out." The voice exhaled deeply. "I'll send you what I have, but you have to be careful. They're watching. They've been watching her for a while. This whole thing is bigger than you think." "I don't care how big it is," Darnell responded, her eyes narrowing. "I need to know what happened, and I'll take it from there." Another pause, then the voice on the other end finally spoke, its tone heavy with warning. "Be careful, Lee. You don't want to end up like the others." Darnell's jaw tightened. She had heard rumors, whispers about what happened to those who went too far, those who dug too deep. But she wasn't going to back down. Not now. "I'll be fine," she said, ending the call. She exhaled, standing up and pacing around her small office. Her mind was racing. This case had taken on a life of its own, and she was going to follow it to the end, no matter the cost. It was then that her secure email pinged with a new message. She opened it immediately. What she saw made her heart race, a video file. Her contact had sent her something she couldn't ignore. With trembling hands, she clicked play. The footage was shaky at first, but it soon steadied, showing a familiar street. The timestamp indicated it was just moments before the incident had been reported. Then, there she was, Amara Briggs. The video clearly showed her walking down the street with her dogs, calm and composed, as two officers approached. Darnell watched, her gaze sharp. The tension in the footage was palpable, the officers' movements deliberate. And then, she saw it. The moment they crossed a line, the footage didn't show the chaos the reports had described. It didn't show Amara attacking anyone. What it did show was the officers closing in, their gestures intimidating, their words condescending. Darnell watched it over and over. The more she saw, the clearer it became. This wasn't an act of aggression. This was a setup. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the screen. The narrative they had built around Amara Briggs was a lie, a carefully constructed story meant to erase the truth. She knew now. Amara wasn't the threat. The real danger was the cover-up that had been unfolding from the very beginning. Darnell grabbed her phone and made another call, this time to a trusted journalist. She couldn't do this alone. It was time to expose the truth, no matter what. Was going to survive this, she needed more than just the truth on her side. She needed someone who understood the stakes, someone who wasn't going to back down because the narrative was already set in stone. Amara paused for a moment, her fingers hovering over the burner phone. Could she trust Darnell? The detective had been investigating the case, digging into the inconsistencies in the reports. Maybe she was genuine, or maybe this was another part of the game. But if she was offering help, it meant Darnell believed in the possibility of a different truth. She hesitated, her gaze flicking to Chaos and Mercy, who were resting quietly beside her, their loyalty unquestioned. They were her constant in a world that had turned upside down. She owed it to them and to herself to keep moving forward, to not let the lies define her. She needed allies, and she needed them now more than ever. With a steadying breath, she tapped out a reply, choosing her words carefully. Meet me at the old cabin off 8th Street. Secure location. I need proof, not words. She sent the message, then set the phone down, her mind already shifting to what came next. If Darnell was as good as her reputation suggested, she might have a way out of this. But if things went sideways, Amara needed a plan. The calm of the cabin wasn't enough to quiet her racing thoughts. She couldn't afford to let herself get bogged down by guilt or anger. The officers had started it, but she had to finish it. She had to make sure that whatever happened, the truth would be heard. Chaos shifted beside her, sensing her tension, and Amara absently scratched behind his ears. The connection she had with these dogs, with her past, was all she had left right now. They had always been her partners, her team, and they still were. And right now, they needed to be ready. Her phone buzzed again, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Gina. The files were ready. Amara's heart skipped a beat. She could feel the shift in the momentum. She had the proof now, the footage, the deleted body cams, the narrative that was about to crack wide open. She grabbed the burner phone, her thumb hovering over the message to Darnell. She wasn't sure how this would play out, but she knew one thing. This was no longer just about survival. It was about taking control of the story and showing the world the truth, no matter how dangerous that might be. She tapped out a quick message to Gina. We're moving forward. Get the files to me as soon as you can. We'll take it from there. Amara stood, her body shifting from the stillness of uncertainty to the readiness of someone on the verge of taking action. It was time to move again, to fight back, to prove that the truth would rise above the lies and get her out without making a sound. Amara's mind was already running through contingencies, weighing every step. She had trained for moments like this, high-stakes rescues where hesitation could mean disaster. She kept her breathing steady, focused, her body poised for whatever was coming next. The dogs were perfect, moving in sync with her, every step calculated, every sound they made muffled by their training. Chaos stayed a few paces ahead, his senses alert for anything out of place. Mercy, always by her side, kept a low profile, just as silent and composed as her handler. Amara pressed her back against the cold metal of a nearby building, listening intently. The sounds of footsteps grew louder, then faded. She peered around the corner, seeing a figure pass by, their silhouette illuminated by the faint light from the old lamps overhead. She was too close now to be seen, but the risk was high. One wrong move, and the whole operation could fall apart. She waited for the figure to pass, then made her move. Her body low to the ground, she glided across the space between the pallets, using the shadows as cover. The warehouse was sprawling, a labyrinth of abandoned equipment, half-demolished walls, and cluttered aisles. She had to stay focused, stay quiet. Every breath counted. Reaching the building closest to her, Amara crouched low, motioning for Chaos and Mercy to stay put. She pressed herself against the cracked, peeling walls, eyes scanning the interior through the small window at ground level. She could see the faint glow of lights coming from the offices at the back of the building. That was her target. It didn't take long for her to find the entrance. A side door, slightly ajar, creaked with age, a subtle invitation. Amara glanced at the dogs, signaling them to follow. They moved in unison, their bodies fluid and silent. Inside, the warehouse smelled of stale air and oil. The low hum of machinery echoed through the vast emptiness. Amara's heart raced, but her training kept her steady. She could hear voices now, muffled and low. They were close, too close. She moved swiftly, slipping past the stacks of crates, her eyes darting to every corner. She could feel the tension in the air, the danger creeping closer. With each step, she knew they were running out of time. The longer they stayed in the open, the more likely they were to be spotted. Finally, Amara reached the hallway leading to the offices. The door at the end was closed, but there was a faint light slipping through the cracks. She moved towards it, pausing to listen for any sounds inside. The faint sound of voices drifted through the door. Gina was there. Taking a breath, Amara pushed the door open just a crack. The scene inside was exactly what she had feared. Gina was tied to a chair, her head hanging low, but she was still breathing, still alive. Two officers stood nearby, their backs turned, unaware of the intrusion. Amara's pulse quickened. There was no time to waste. She needed to act fast. She reached for her comms unit, her fingers brushing against it. Curtis's gear had been designed for moments like this, small, discreet, and powerful. She tapped the button and heard a faint click, signaling that the jamming device was working. No one could track her or the dogs now. Taking one last glance around the corner, Amara made her move. She slipped inside, her movements fluid and quick. She crossed the floor, her focus solely on Gina. One of the officers turned, but it was too late. Amara was already on him, her arm outstretched, her hand clamping over his mouth before he could even react. She spun him around, delivering a quick, well-placed strike to his neck. He crumpled to the floor without a sound. The second officer barely had time to register what happened before Mercy was on him, pinning him down with a controlled force that left him gasping for air. Chaos stood by, alert and ready to respond at a moment's notice. Amara wasted no time. She cut through Gina's restraints with a swift motion, helping her to her feet. Gina was groggy, but she was still alive, still able to move. "Come on, we need to go," Amara urged, her voice low and urgent. Gina nodded, still shaken but determined. "I'm with you." They moved quickly, retracing Amara's path back through the warehouse. The tension in the air was palpable as they made their way toward the exit, the sound of footsteps growing louder again. They had to move faster. As they neared the fence, Amara spotted a shadow moving toward them. Another officer, this one alert and armed. The plan was about to change. "Move!" Amara shouted, pushing Gina forward. Chaos and Mercy surged ahead, ready to defend. The officer raised his weapon, but before he could pull the trigger, Chaos was on him, knocking the gun out of his hand and sending him sprawling to the ground. Amara grabbed Gina's arm, pulling her through the gap in the fence they'd created earlier. They were out, for now. But Amara knew this was just the beginning, her fingers brushing the cool grip as she took a steadying breath. The sound of the mercenaries' heavy boots grew louder, echoing in the narrow corridor. She had seconds, maybe less, to react. Her heart was calm, focused, the adrenaline keeping her sharp. Chaos and Mercy flanked her, anticipating her next move without a word spoken. The two dogs had become extensions of her own will, operating with the precision of a team forged in combat. They would move in silence, no hesitation, no second thoughts. Amara's eyes flicked to the narrow opening between the metal shelves. She could see the mercenaries now, too close for comfort, but still unaware of her exact position. Their rifles swung in her direction, but they were too slow. She had the element of surprise, and she intended to use it. With a quick signal to the dogs, Amara rolled out from behind the cover of the shelves, her sidearm raised, a fluid motion honed by years of training. Chaos surged ahead, tackling one of the mercenaries to the ground, his growl low and menacing. The man's rifle skittered across the floor as he struggled beneath the dog's weight. Mercy darted past Amara, her sleek form a blur as she moved to the second mercenary. She jumped up, sinking her teeth into his forearm, forcing him to drop his weapon with a loud clang. Amara didn't hesitate. She crossed the distance between them in 2 long strides, planting a firm boot on the first mercenary's chest and using his body as leverage to take down the second. A sharp strike to the man's throat left him gasping for air, his grip on Mercy's fur weakening. The dog quickly released him, moving back into position by Amara's side, ready for the next move. With the immediate threat neutralized, Amara surveyed the scene. The 2 mercenaries were down, but she knew the clock was ticking. The longer they stayed inside, the more likely reinforcements would arrive. She signaled for the dogs to stay close as she moved deeper into the building. The hallway narrowed further, leading to a door at the far end, the only barrier between her and Gina. The muffled voices on the other side were growing clearer now. It sounded like they were speaking in low tones, likely unaware of the commotion just moments before. Amara's mind raced, calculating her next steps. She approached the door silently, pressing her ear to the wood. She could hear one of the men arguing with someone else, likely in charge, about what to do with Gina. Her pulse quickened, but she forced herself to stay calm. This was it, the moment she had been working toward. With a soft push, the door creaked open just enough for her to slip through. The dim light from a lone desk lamp cast shadows across the room. In the far corner, Gina was sitting, her arms tied to a chair, but her head was up, her eyes alert. Amara's heart skipped a beat. She was alive. That was the only thing that mattered right now. "Gina," Amara whispered, moving swiftly toward her. She untied the ropes around Gina's wrists, her hands shaking slightly, but steady with determination. "We need to go, now." Gina blinked, taking a moment to process what was happening, then nodded, her voice hoarse but resolute. "I knew you'd come. Thought I might never see you again." "No time for reunions," Amara replied softly, glancing toward the door. "We've got to get out of here." As she helped Gina to her feet, the sound of footsteps echoed outside the office. Her heart pounded. There was no time to waste. Amara turned to Mercy and Chaos, signaling them to lead the way. She could hear the faint shuffle of boots approaching. They had to move fast. Gina was steady on her feet, though her face showed the strain of her captivity. Amara kept one hand on her shoulder as they moved, keeping close to the walls, her senses on high alert. They passed the mercenaries' unconscious bodies, moving quickly through the maze of corridors. The exit was near. She could see the faint light filtering through the cracked windows of the old building. They were almost out. Then, a voice rang out behind them, loud and clear. "There! She's getting away!" Amara's pulse spiked, and she grabbed Gina's arm, pulling her toward the exit. Chaos and Mercy moved ahead, ready to defend. Amara slammed her shoulder into the rusted door, pushing it open just enough for them to slip through. They were out, but the night was far from over, their grip responding to Amara's silent commands. The man's struggles became more frantic, but he was no match for the combined force of Chaos and Mercy. His body trembled with fear as he realized his fate had already been sealed. Amara finished cutting through Gina's restraints and helped her to her feet. "We're getting out of here now," she said firmly, her voice unwavering. Gina nodded, still shaken, but her eyes were clear now, the terror of being held captive slowly fading as she realized she was free. "Thank you," Gina whispered, her voice hoarse. Amara didn't have time to respond. She turned to the man on the floor, still writhing beneath the dog's jaws. "You're not going anywhere," Amara said coldly, stepping away. She motioned for the dogs to ease off him, and they released their grip, but remained alert, their eyes locked on the man as if daring him to move. "Get up," Amara commanded. The man, gasping for breath, scrambled to his feet, his legs unsteady, his face pale. He was defeated, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of defiance mixed with fear. He opened his mouth to speak, but Amara didn't wait for him to finish. Without warning, she grabbed the collar of his shirt and shoved him toward the door. "You're not going to make it out of here if you keep screwing around," she said, her tone sharp. The man said nothing, but the fear in his eyes spoke volumes. Chaos and Mercy stayed close, their posture alert, watching the man's every movement. Amara kept her hand on her gun, ready to act if needed, but she didn't want to kill him. Not yet. She needed answers, and if he had any hope of survival, it would be because he provided them. The sounds of reinforcements approaching outside echoed down the hallway. Amara's eyes flicked to the exit, noting the distant flicker of flashlights nearing the building. Time was running out. "Move!" Amara barked. The man didn't need to be told twice. He shuffled in front of them, his every step hesitant, his fear palpable. They moved quickly through the dark warehouse, with the sounds of the dog's paws patting softly on the concrete floor as they passed crates and stacks of abandoned equipment. They reached the back exit, the dim light from the street filtering through the cracks in the door. Amara's hand went to the handle, but she froze for a second, feeling a surge of tension through her body. She quickly scanned the area, eyes darting to the corners of the room. The street outside was empty for now, but the patrol cars had to be close. Without another word, she threw open the door and pushed the man out into the open, her eyes scanning the shadows for any signs of movement. Chaos and Mercy were right behind her, their bodies tense as they surveyed the area. The street was still quiet, the early evening air cool and fresh. They didn't have much time. "Run!" Amara ordered, as she checked her surroundings one last time. Gina glanced at her with a mixture of gratitude and apprehension, but there was no hesitation in her steps as she followed Amara down the alley. Amara stayed at the rear, her senses sharp, her mind calculating. She wasn't out of danger yet. The man would be a loose end, but she couldn't waste any more time on him. She needed to get Gina to safety first. Every step they took was one closer to freedom, but Amara knew the moment they left the warehouse, the chase would start again. The dogs stayed close, their every movement in sync with her own, ready to spring into action if needed. They reached the corner of the street, where a car was waiting, an ally of Amara's. She had arranged the getaway in advance, but even now, she knew things were far from over. Amara gave one last glance over her shoulder, making sure no one was following them. They were still in the clear for now. With a final push, She opened the door to the car and ushered Gina inside. "Let's go," she said, slamming the door behind her. The car roared to life, and they sped off into the night, the sound of tires on asphalt replacing the tension in the air. Amara sat back in her seat, her breathing steady now, but her mind was already turning, calculating their next move. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The road ahead was uncertain, but with Gina safe, she had at least one ally on her side. And that, for now, was enough to keep moving forward, to take revenge on anyone who had a hand in exposing him. And you, Amara, were just the first piece of the puzzle he could reach. Amara ran a hand through her hair, her mind struggling to piece everything together. The whole situation felt like a tangled mess of lies and manipulation. But one thing was clear now. Renaer wasn't just some rogue officer. He was part of something much bigger and far more dangerous. "Why didn't you tell me about this sooner?" Amara asked, her voice tight, a hint of frustration edging her words. Gina met her gaze, her expression pained. "I didn't know the full picture until now. I thought it was just random. But as I pieced everything together, I realized it was more than that. I didn't want to risk drawing attention to you before you were ready to hear it. And now," she trailed off, her eyes flicking nervously toward the door. Amara stood up slowly, her gaze focused ahead, her thoughts racing. "This isn't just about me. It's about everything Renaer's hiding. If he's that deep into Black Ops, then who else is involved? Who else is on his side?" Gina didn't respond right away. The weight of the situation was sinking in, but she finally spoke, her voice heavy. "I think there's more. Renaer didn't just blend in, Amara. He's been covering his tracks for years, and now he's using you to cover up his past. He's been playing the long game." Amara nodded, the pieces falling into place. She had been targeted, not just because of the incident with the officers, but because of something far deeper, something Renaer had been hiding for years. She could feel the anger building in her chest, mixing with the guilt that had been pressing down on her since the fight with Rickson and Renaer's men. "We need to finish this," Amara said quietly. "We can't let him get away with this anymore. He's been hiding in the shadows for too long." She turned toward the door, but not before one last look at Gina. "Get ready," she said. "It's not over." The two of them moved quickly, with Amara keeping her eyes on the door, making sure no one had heard the sounds of the struggle from earlier. She knew they didn't have much time before reinforcements arrived. Chaos and Mercy stayed close by her side, alert and ready to react at a moment's notice. They'd been through enough together to know when the fight was about to escalate. Amara gave them a quick nod, signaling that they were ready for whatever was next. The warehouse was eerily quiet as Amara moved toward the exit. Every step was calculated, but her mind was already 2 steps ahead, thinking about the path she would take to confront Renaer once and for all. She couldn't let him twist the narrative anymore. She wouldn't be the scapegoat for his mistakes. Her eyes flicked to Gina, who was walking behind her, steady but still shaken. She had done her part. Now it was time for Amara to finish it. As they reached the front of the warehouse, Amara stopped, listening. The faint sounds of movement from outside told her the patrol car was still parked near the entrance. She signaled for Gina to wait behind cover, crouching low as she scanned the surroundings. In the distance, the sound of approaching vehicles made her heart race, but it wasn't fear. It was focus. She was closing in on her target. Amara took a deep breath, steadying herself. This was her moment. No more running. No more hiding. It was time to confront Renaer, and this time she would make sure he wouldn't walk away unscathed. With one final look back at Gina, she nodded. "Stay here. I'll handle this." Gina's eyes locked with hers, full of gratitude and fear, but she didn't argue. She knew the stakes. Amara moved forward, her hand on the gun at her side, her dogs at her heel. The showdown was about to begin. Amara leaned back in her chair, her mind processing everything Darnell had said. It was a grim realization, one that explained the twisted web Renaer had woven around her, and it made the stakes even higher than she'd imagined. This wasn't just about the fight she'd been pulled into. It was about something deeper, something personal that had been simmering for years. "So, what's the next move?" Amara asked, her voice steady, though the weight of the situation hung heavy in the air. Darnell glanced at her, pausing before answering. "We need to keep moving before Renaer has the chance to close the door on us again. He's playing a long game, but he's starting to show his hand. His network's fragile right now, and that's our opportunity." Amara nodded, her mind already working through their options. She could feel the pressure mounting, but she couldn't let the fear take hold. Not now. Not when she was so close to unraveling everything. "I have to find him. I need to know what his next move is." Darnell's eyes softened slightly, a flicker of understanding passing between them. "You're right, and we need to act fast. The more time passes, the more chance he has to destroy the evidence, to cover his tracks. But we can't do it alone. I've been talking to some of my contacts on the inside, but we're still a step behind. We'll need everything you've got. Those files, the footage, anything to expose him for what he is." Amara stood, her thoughts sharp and focused. "I've got the drive with all the footage. It's enough to expose Renaer, but we need the right leverage. Darnell, do you trust the people you've been working with?" Darnell didn't hesitate. "I do, but we'll need more than trust to bring him down. We need a full exposé, something that can't be ignored. This isn't just about Renaer anymore. It's about everyone he's manipulated, everyone who's helped him bury the truth. Once we move on this, there's no turning back." Amara's jaw tightened, and she turned toward the dogs, who were lying on the floor, watching her with unwavering loyalty. "We've come this far, and I won't stop until he's held accountable," she said, her voice steady, determined. Darnell nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "Then we move, but carefully. We've got one shot at this. I'll bring in my contacts, and you keep doing what you do best, staying one step ahead. Let's get this done." Amara reached for the drive in her pocket, her fingers brushing it. She could feel the weight of the truth in her hand, and with it, the responsibility to make sure Renaer's reign of manipulation ended once and for all. The plan was risky, but it was the only chance they had. She turned back to Darnell, her gaze unflinching. "I'm ready. Let's go." As they moved toward the exit, Amara glanced at Chaos and Mercy, both of them up and moving with a fluidity that matched her own focus. They were more than her companions. They were her partners in this fight. The world outside was still, but it wouldn't stay that way for long. Renaer was on the move, and so was she. The game was finally about to change. Chaos and Mercy running one last check on their harnesses and equipment. The dogs were silent but alert, their calm demeanor a reflection of the focus Amara had instilled in them over countless training sessions. They knew the stakes, and they were ready. Amara stood and glanced at Gina, who was checking the encrypted drive and securing everything in place. Gina looked exhausted, but her resolve was unwavering. Amara gave her a small nod, an unspoken promise to return and finish this, no matter what it took. Darnell was going over the final map in the van, making sure everyone was clear on the plan. "The cameras will be down for the next 15 minutes, Darnell said, her tone sharp. "Once you're in, we'll be counting on you to move quickly. Don't hesitate, and don't take any unnecessary risks." Amara gave a curt nod, absorbing the plan one last time. Everything had been meticulously planned, but there were no guarantees. One mistake, one misstep, and they could all be compromised. But there was no turning back now. "Ready?" Darnell asked. Amara's eyes met hers, and she could see the determination in the detective's expression. This wasn't just about taking down a corrupt officer. This was about sending a message, about exposing the truth that had been buried for so long. "As ready as I'll ever be," Amara replied. With that, Darnell gave a sharp nod, and the team moved into action. Amara led the way, her body tense, her senses on high alert. Chaos and Mercy followed closely, their movements synchronized with hers. Gina, though not physically present, was with them every step of the way, her eyes glued to her laptop screen, feeding them updates and information in real time. The van rolled to a stop a few blocks from the police department, and the team disembarked. Amara's heart was steady, but her mind was racing. She had a job to do, and failure was not an option. The path to the maintenance entrance was clear. There were no patrols in sight for the moment, and the area was quiet. Amara gave the signal to move, and they made their way to the entrance, blending into the shadows. The maintenance entrance was, as Darnell had said, locked, but not alarmed. With a few quick motions, Amara disabled the lock and pushed the door open, leading the way inside. The building was cold, the air thick with the scent of old machinery and dust. The only sound was the faint hum of the generator in the distance, and the occasional shuffle of feet as they moved through the narrow halls. They reached the stairwell without incident, moving quickly but silently. Amara's eyes stayed focused ahead, her hand on the gun at her side, ready for anything. Chaos and Mercy stayed at her heel, each step calculated, each movement in sync with hers. At the basement level, Amara's eyes flicked to the server room door. She could hear the faint murmur of voices from the guards outside, but the hallway was clear for now. She turned to the dogs, giving them a final hand signal. "Stay close," she whispered. "We move fast." They reached the server room door, and Amara paused for a moment, listening for any sounds on the other side. There was nothing. She took a deep breath, then gently pushed the door open, stepping inside. The server room was exactly as Darnell had described it, a small, dimly lit space with rows of servers lining the walls. The single camera at the door blinked, but with Gina's help, it was already offline. Amara moved swiftly toward the master console, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she plugged in the drive. The dogs were on high alert, scanning the room for any signs of danger. Amara's heart raced, the seconds ticking by faster than she liked. She glanced at the clock on the wall, counting down the minutes. "Gina," she whispered into her comms unit. "We're in." "I'm tracking the data transfer," Gina replied through the earpiece. "It's moving smoothly. You've got about 10 minutes left before the backup cycle kicks in." Amara's fingers moved with practiced precision, navigating the system as the files began to transfer. The room was quiet, the only sound the soft whir of the servers and the clicking of keys. The dogs stayed close, their bodies tense, their eyes watching the door. But the moment was fleeting. A distant sound, a sharp thud followed by a voice, shattered the silence. Someone was approaching. Amara's hand went to her gun instinctively, but before she could react, the door swung open and 2 guards appeared in the doorway. Their eyes locked on her, and in that instant, everything went wrong. Without missing a beat, Amara dove behind the server racks, her gun drawn, but she didn't fire. She had no choice but to move fast. Chaos and Mercy reacted instantly, springing into action. Chaos lunged at the first guard, taking him down in a flurry of motion. Mercy darted forward, sinking her teeth into the second guard's arm, disarming him in a single motion. Amara was on her feet in seconds, taking down the first guard with a controlled strike to the neck. The second guard was struggling, but Mercy had him pinned. She reached for the drive, pulling it out of the console, just as the backup cycle began to kick in. "Time's up!" Gina's voice crackled through the comms. "Get out now!" Amara didn't need to be told twice. She grabbed the drive and sprinted toward the exit, Chaos and Mercy close behind. The sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway, but they were already moving, already gone. As Amara and the dogs made their way through the building, she could feel the weight of the drive in her pocket, the truth they had fought so hard for now in their hands. She had no idea what the fallout would be, but one thing was certain: they weren't finished yet. The battle was just beginning, made her heart race. The flashlight beam moved, searching the room, but it didn't linger long. Amara held her breath, not daring to move an inch as the light swept past her. She knew that if the guard was going to see anything, it would be in this moment. But Chaos and Mercy were still, their bodies low to the ground, their eyes trained on the door. Amara felt the dog's tension mirror her own. This was the critical moment. If the guard opened the door, it was game over. But if he moved on... The door creaked again, and the beam of light was gone. The footsteps receded, fading into the distance. Amara exhaled slowly, her heart rate slowing as the immediate threat passed. The guard had moved on, and the door hadn't opened. She checked the screen again. 75%. It was nearing the finish line. With another glance at the hallway, she moved quickly back to the console, fingers flying over the keyboard as she adjusted the file transfer to ensure everything was secure. Chaos and Mercy stayed at her side, every muscle in their bodies coiled, ready for anything. The seconds felt like hours, but the progress bar ticked steadily upward. 80%, 85%. Amara's mind stayed focused. She had to finish this. No more distractions, no more waiting. The risk was too high. As the percentage climbed to 90%, she glanced at the door again, listening for any signs that the patrol was moving back toward the basement. "Almost there," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper, just loud enough for the dogs to hear. Their ears twitched at the sound of her voice, but they stayed calm. Mercy's muscles were still tense, and Chaos's low growl rumbled in the background, ready for any threat that might appear. At 95%, Amara's hands moved quickly, locking the system and pulling the drive out of the console. A soft click confirmed it was safely detached. She slipped the drive back into her pocket, giving Chaos and Mercy a quick hand signal to stay in position. She exhaled, her body tense with the effort of not reacting. "Move," she whispered. The dogs were already in motion before the words left her lips. They moved with silent precision, retreating into the shadows with Amara in tow. They had completed the transfer, and now it was time to leave before anything went wrong. The hallway outside remained quiet as they moved swiftly back toward the basement stairs. Amara's heart still raced, but the adrenaline felt more controlled now. With the data in hand, the next step was getting out, and they couldn't afford to linger. The sounds of footsteps from the upper levels had already faded, but she knew they weren't out of the woods yet. They reached the maintenance exit, the door still unlatched, and Amara checked the hallway once more. The coast was clear. She motioned for Gina to follow her, and with a final look back at the evidence room, they made their way to the outside. As they stepped into the quiet night, Amara allowed herself a brief moment of relief, but she knew this was just the beginning. They had the evidence, but now the real work began, getting it into the right hands before Renaer and his people could stop them. Amara turned to Gina, her voice steady. "We're not done yet. Let's get to Darnell. It's time to end this." With a final glance toward the building, Amara led the way, the dogs close behind, ready for whatever came next. The operation had been a success, but the fight was far from over. Who had been knocked to the floor groaned, trying to push himself up, but the force of Amara's grip was too much. His arm was pinned at an awkward angle, and he couldn't break free. The room felt smaller now, the air thicker with the sound of footsteps and the rapid ticking of the progress bar. Time was running out. Amara quickly scanned the room. The first officer was still unconscious beneath Chaos, his body limp and unresisting. The second officer was struggling, but Mercy had him pinned, her jaws tight around his wrist, preventing him from reaching for anything. The fight had been loud enough to attract attention, and there was no way they were getting out quietly now. She looked at the terminal again. 94%. Almost done. Her heart pounded in her chest, and her mind raced through the options. They were running out of time. The reinforcements would be here any minute, and they hadn't even started their exit yet. "Gina," Amara said, her voice firm, though the tension in her body was palpable. "We're almost there. Hold tight." Gina, who had been watching the screens intently from her corner, nodded quickly. I'm ready. Just a little more. I've got everything secured. Just get those files. Amara shifted her focus back to the guards, her hand tight on the weapon she had taken from the second officer. The situation was escalating quickly, but she couldn't let it throw her off. She still had a job to finish. A few more seconds ticked by, and the transfer bar reached 98%. She was almost there, but Amara's instincts flared. More footsteps. Closer now. She could hear voices growing louder, and her pulse quickened. They couldn't stay here any longer. Amara's eyes darted to the hallway. Another officer would be entering any second, and she knew they wouldn't give her the chance to act this time. They had to move. "Gina, get the files to Darnell," Amara barked. "Now!" Gina didn't hesitate. Her fingers flew over the laptop, initiating the final upload, sending the files to their secure storage. "Done," she whispered, glancing up at Amara. "I'm sending them now." Amara's head snapped back to the room. Chaos and Mercy were still in their positions, alert and ready, eyes locked on her. She could hear more footsteps. The countdown to disaster was starting. "Get ready," she whispered, stepping into the shadows again. "We move the second this is done." The room was still as the last few moments passed in agonizing slowness. The progress bar climbed to 100%. The files were secure. "Go!" Amara ordered sharply. Chaos and Mercy surged forward, instinctively moving with her toward the exit. The dogs moved like shadows, silent but deadly, with every movement in perfect coordination with Amara's commands. But before they could make it to the door, the sound of boots on the floor rang out again. This time the officer was right outside, and Amara knew she didn't have much time. She turned to the dogs. "Stay," she ordered quietly. They froze, their bodies tensed, eyes trained on her. She made her move just as the officer stepped into view, his gun raised, his eyes scanning the room. Chaos and Mercy moved in a blur, but Amara was already on him, her hand reaching for the gun at her side. The officer's eyes widened just as Chaos hit him full force, knocking him back into the shelves with a loud crash. The gun clattered to the ground, and Mercy was on it in a heartbeat, pulling it out of reach. Amara, her heart pounding, pressed forward, taking the man's wrist and twisting it behind his back. He struggled, but his body went limp when Amara struck the pressure point in his shoulder. He collapsed under her strength, his protests cut short. "Move," Amara said, breathing heavily. Chaos and Mercy stepped aside, and Amara grabbed the officer's radio, throwing it to the corner of the room. She could hear more footsteps, closer now. The tension was suffocating, but the countdown was still ticking. They had no time to waste. Amara reached for the terminal again, her fingers flying over the keys as she checked the transfer. It was done, but the sound of approaching officers told her they couldn't stay here any longer. She grabbed the drive from the console, slipping it back into her pocket. "We're out," she said. "Now." The last officer, the one who had been near the door, was still struggling to stand. His eyes were filled with panic as Amara motioned to the dogs. Chaos and Mercy moved with deadly precision, keeping him in check, ensuring he wouldn't make a move. Amara turned to Gina, who was already heading toward the exit. "Let's go," Amara said, her voice steely and calm. They moved quickly, crossing the room with calculated steps, keeping to the shadows as the footsteps behind them continued to grow louder. Time was running out, but they were close. The exit was in sight. Just a few more steps, and they'd be out of the building, with the truth in their hands. The battle wasn't over yet, but with every second that passed, they were one step closer to bringing Renair's empire crashing down. "Move now!" Amara hissed. With the dogs following at her side, she and Gina darted into the corridor. They were almost free. Almost. I hope you had a great time listening to this story. It's always a pleasure to share tales that not only entertain but also resonate on a deeper level. Stories that are full of suspense, emotion, and raw truths are the kind that makes people think, reflect, and perhaps even see the world in a new light. and this particular story was no different. I'm glad you could join in for this one. If it struck a chord with you, don't hesitate to share it with friends and family. Word of mouth is how we build communities around great stories. I'm sure others would love to experience this journey too, and who knows, maybe it will spark a conversation or inspire someone else. Sharing stories is one of the most powerful ways we can connect as a community, and your support makes a huge difference in growing this space where stories matter. If you enjoyed this video, I strongly recommend you subscribe to the channel. By subscribing, you'll be among the first to get access to new and exciting content. There's a lot more where this came from. Each story is carefully crafted, drawing from a mix of real-world events, strong character development, and compelling narratives that push boundaries and spark discussions. I promise you, there's always something fresh and exciting just around the corner. Your subscription not only helps you stay updated, but also supports the creative process that goes into producing every single episode. Now, as I continue working on bringing new stories to life, I've also handpicked 2 more narratives I believe you'll really enjoy. These stories, like the one you just watched, are not just about entertaining you. They aim to provoke thought, stir emotions, and present a perspective that might otherwise go unnoticed. Each of these upcoming videos explores different facets of human nature, justice, and the world we live in. Whether it's a tale of triumph against adversity, an exploration of personal strength, or a deep dive into real-world issues, they all share a common thread: authenticity and impact. The beauty of storytelling lies in its ability to make us feel, to teach us something new, and to challenge our beliefs. In the coming stories, you'll find characters who undergo profound transformations, struggle with complex situations, and ultimately emerge stronger. I can't wait for you to dive into them, as I've put in a lot of effort to craft stories that resonate with depth, sincerity, and an unforgettable emotional pull. As I mentioned earlier, subscribing to the channel ensures that you won't miss out on any of these exciting updates. It gives you immediate access to all the content as soon as it's published. Trust me, you don't want to miss out on what's coming next. There's always something new to discover, and I make sure every video is packed with excitement, drama, and real-life inspirations. Plus, you'll be supporting the work behind these productions, which is incredibly rewarding for everyone involved. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. By doing so, you're not just staying updated. You're joining a community that values storytelling, creativity, and the emotional connection we share through these stories. And if you haven't already, don't forget to share the videos with others. The more people who get to experience these stories, the bigger and stronger our community grows. Thank you once again for your incredible support. Your engagement, whether through likes, comments, or sharing, means the world to me. It's because of you that I can continue doing what I love, and I can't tell you enough how much it means to see the channel growing and thriving, all thanks to your interest and participation. Now, I know that sometimes life gets busy, and you may not have the time to always keep up with everything that's released, but don't worry. I've made it easier for you to stay on top of things. When you subscribe, you'll get automatic notifications whenever a new video goes live. You won't have to keep checking manually. The latest stories will come straight to your notifications, so you're always in the loop. In the meantime, take a look at the stories I've carefully selected for you. They've been handpicked based on their unique themes, powerful messages, and their ability to resonate with a wide audience. Each one is meant to take you on an emotional journey, opening your eyes to new ideas and experiences. They're the kind of stories that stay with you long after the credits roll. To me, creating stories isn't just about making something that entertains for a few minutes. It's about making a lasting impact. I believe in telling stories that matter, that challenge us to think and act differently, and that ultimately bring us closer together as a community. Whether it's a heart-pounding thriller, a thought-provoking drama, or an inspiring tale of resilience, my goal is always the same: to create content that speaks to your heart. By subscribing, not only will you get access to these videos, but you'll also be supporting a larger movement. It's about more than just entertainment. It's about cultivating an atmosphere where stories that matter are shared, discussed, and enjoyed by people who appreciate their depth. You, as part of this community, are a vital piece of that puzzle. So, go ahead, give the channel a subscribe, share it with those who appreciate a good story, and prepare for what's to come. You won't regret it. Each story I bring you is crafted with care, passion, and a lot of hard work, and I'm truly excited to share what's next with you. Thank you for being here, thank you for being part of this journey, and I hope you continue to enjoy the stories we create together. And once again, stay tuned for what's coming next. I'm really excited to share more with you, and I can't wait for you to see what's in store. Whether you're watching on your own, with friends, or sharing it with your family, I know you'll find something to enjoy. Let's keep this storytelling adventure going. I promise you, it's going to be amazing. Take care and enjoy your day. And don't forget to share, subscribe, and comment. I'm looking forward to hearing what you think.